If you're a dad who actually cares where your family is heading, you probably already feel like time is moving faster than you'd like, and your kids are growing up in front of your eyes, and most days feel like you're reacting to everything instead of leading the charge. That's why I built an annual family summit guide that I call the Household Rule. This is a simple framework for you and your spouse to get away, or you can just sit at the kitchen table after bedtime for a few nights, seek God together, and actually design the next year of your life on purpose. And if you want the full workbook with all the prompts and all the pages, the link is in the description below. In this video, I want to walk you through why this particular goal setting framework is the key, why each piece matters, why it's done in this order, and how it all fits together. Again, if you want to go deeper, grab the full workbook in the description. It's absolutely free. And think of this approach as your high level operating system for leading your household with intention. Now, we start with story before we start with strategy. The first thing most driven people want to do is set goals and build plans, but biblically, you don't plan well until you've remembered well. God is constantly calling his people to remember his deliverance, his faithfulness, their failures, and the consequences of drifting. So the summit begins by looking back over the last year. Where did God clearly show up? Where did your family experience joy and closeness? Where did things feel chaotic or anxious or numb? This is about refusing to live in denial about the story you're actually telling with your time, with your habits, and with your choices. Until a couple can look back over the last 12 months with honesty and say, this is the direction our current life is taking us, any goals that you set are going to be disconnected from reality. And similar to Google Maps, if you don't have a crystal clear starting point, you can't draw an accurate map to where you want to go. Once you've reflected on the story, you move into the vision side of things. But this is not just some vague vision or some selfish ambition stuff you want to play with. This is your future family vision. Instead of asking, what do we want to accomplish? We ask, who is God calling our family to become over the next 3 years? 3 years is long enough to matter, but it's close enough to feel real. The point of this section is to really lift your eyes above survival mode and ask, what kind of spiritual atmosphere do we want in our home? What kind of marriage do we want? What kind of things do we want our kids to watch us do? What level of health and energy do we want to bring into our work and our parenting? What financial story do we want to be telling about our debt, our generosity, our building and stewardship? So this is not a bucket list thing or some arbitrary set of goals that sound nice. This is naming the kind of family that you believe God is inviting you to become if you were to be unusually faithful for a concentrated stretch of time. Then we do something that feels a little bit crazy, and we do it on purpose. We compress the timeline. So once you've written out that 3 year future, the household rule guide asks you to imagine, what if for some reason this 3 year picture had to become a reality in just 1 year? It's a thought experiment. And why do we do this? Because it instantly exposes what actually matters and how you get there. It forces you into pathways thinking, and you start seeing levers that you could pull, and hard conversations that you've avoided, and habits that obviously need to die, and priorities that are clearly needing to be elevated, and other things that really need to be put to bed. Compressing the vision into a 1 year scenario makes you ask, if we had to change faster, what would we do differently? And even if you never hit that compressed version in 12 months, aiming there almost guarantees you'll be dramatically closer in a year and likely to hit it before the original 3 years. Then out of that compressed 1 year picture, we finally talk about goals, but we talk about very few of them. Instead of the 15 New Year's resolutions that a lot of us sometimes do, you're looking for a small set of 1 year outcomes in the core areas of life. This is your walk with God, your marriage, your health, your work, your finances, and your growth as a man. And the reason you want to limit the number is your attention is finite. Every goal that you add that doesn't truly matter towards your 3 year vision, it's stealing focus and time and energy from the ones that do. The guide is built to help you ask, if this year were wildly successful for our family based on God's definition of success, What would undeniably be true at the end of it? Those things then become your annual goals. And again, they're not random ambitions, they're distilled from that compressed future family vision. But even a small set of annual goals can sometimes feel overwhelming, and that's why the next move is to break it down into 90-day sprints. A year is long enough that you can procrastinate forever and still feel like you have time, even though it's quickly escaping you. 90 days is short enough that you feel the weight of every single week, but it's long enough to make real progress. And so the guide is going to have you and your spouse choose one primary sprint for the next quarter, and then maybe a second or a third secondary one. The question is, in the next 90 days, what are the few areas of focus that would collapse the distance between where we are and that compressed 1 year vision? Another way to ask the question around this particular section is, what goals make other goals easier or irrelevant if we accomplish them first? And this is where you stop trying to change everything and you start asking, what 20% of actions will move 80% of the results? This is basic Pareto principle applied to our household vision. Now, goals and sprints are just ideas unless they show up in your actual calendar. And that's why the framework moves you into rhythms next. This is where you install your vision into time instead of just vague desires like we should connect more or we should get healthier. You start designing a default weekly template. This might have things like a protected Sabbath, an anchor day, a standing weekly date night, weekly family nights, one-on-one time with kids, money check-ins, the steps necessary to purchase a investment property, and specific windows for your most important work and training and all that stuff. The point here is not to be rigid and create some miserable schedule. It's to make sure that your values are visible in what you're doing. If you say marriage is a priority, but there's no recurring space for connection, the calendar is telling the truth and your words are the lies. This section is where your faith and your goals get tied to real time blocks and real trade offs. The reality you'll be confronted with in this exercise is that you can't do everything. You can't do everything that you want to do, and that there are things that you're currently doing, while you may enjoy them, will have to be killed if you want to reach your goals. And alongside the weekly template, you also choose a few daily anchors. These are small, repeatable patterns that keep you oriented and focused when life gets crazy. Think about short morning and evening rhythms that touch scripture and prayer and connection and physical stewardship. The reason for this piece is that most lasting change happens in those tiny, repeated acts of obedience and faithfulness. A family that touches base with God and with each other every single day, even briefly, is going to weather storms very differently than one that never slows down long enough to connect well. The daily anchors are your minimum effective dose of faithfulness. When everything else is chaos, which will happen at times, because that's called life, this is what you're doing. And then there's the part that most people skip: pruning. Similar to some of the initial cuts that you made on your calendar in the previous section, if you're trying to compress a 3 year vision into 1 year, you cannot just keep adding things in. You have to decide what dies. The household rule guides you through naming your, what I call, holy no's for the quarter. These are the good things that you're doing that you need to let go of so that the best things can grow. The reason this is built into the framework is because if you don't explicitly choose what to stop doing, you will quietly default back to the same overloaded life that got you off track on meaningful growth as a family to begin with. Saying no is often the only way to be faithful to the mission God has actually given to your household. Finally, the last movement of the framework is execution and review. A once-a-year summit with no follow-through is just a nice conversation. So the guide helps you establish a weekly leadership meeting for you and your spouse where you pray together, look at a tiny scorecard of metrics, review the upcoming week, pick 1 to 3 big rocks, and encourage each other and course correct with each other. Then every 90 days, you're going to run a mini summit. You're going to debrief the sprint. You're going to see where God moved, see where you drifted, reset your focus. The reason this is essential is because transformation is rarely linear. You're going to have weeks that are off. You're going to have sick kids. You're going to have vacation. You'll likely forget. life will hit you. And the weekly and quarterly reviews are like grabbing the steering wheel again instead of letting the car continue to drift into whatever lane the culture wants your family to go occupy. So when you zoom out, the whole thing is really simple. Remember your story, name a future family vision, compress it to force clarity, choose a few leveraged goals, break them into 90-day sprints, install them into rhythms, prune what doesn't fit, and then review it consistently. All of this is under the lordship of Jesus, done with our Bibles in hand, done with honest and heartfelt prayers. This is not the cultural norm of kind of productivity and hustle and goal setting. So if you want help actually doing this with your spouse, step by step, prompts and instructions, space to write, the scriptures to use, the clear sequence to follow, I put everything into that printable household rule workbook. You can grab it in the link in the description. And my hope is that a year from now and 3 years from now, you'll be able to look back and say, we didn't just let the years happen to us. We numbered our days, and by God's grace, we intentionally built an impactful household.